Good morning. My name is Noah Davis, and I'm joined by my colleagues Ian McLean, Donovan Colley, and Emma King. We are members of the RTO Implementation Committee at the ESDC. Today, we will present our comprehensive approach to implementing the TBS directive on return to office and social media usage. Senior management has tasked us with ensuring compliance while also addressing the broader ethical implications of these policies. Ultimately, our goal is to provide a balanced, practical, and future-oriented strategy which upholds public service integrity while addressing the unique realities of ESDC's workforce and mandate. Next slide, please.
Good morning. The challenge of managing RTO mandates and social media usage is complex and further complicated by the rapidly shifting workforce in the Canadian federal public service. 40% of the public service has entered the workforce since the work from home initiatives have began during the pandemic, with an expectation of this service being provided. These are the people that we need to be investing in for the future of the Canadian public service and are the people who replace us. As you can see in the slide above you, there has been a rapid shift in the workforce demographics, including in the management team. Millennials now represent the largest group of public servants. This demographic shift necessitates a change in workforce culture and expectations and is a contributing factor to the issues we are trying to address. The influx of new and diverse employees with a different set of expectations and values requires us to adapt our policies and practices to meet their needs and leverage their potential with upholding the values of public servants are called to live by, serving the public interest, upholding democratic values, and maintaining the integrity of nonpartisan professional public service. The Values and Ethics Code for the Public Service emphasizes respect for democracy, people, integrity, stewardship, and excellence. These values are crucial for fostering public trust and confidence. While we are seeing productive and important work being done, there is need to address the issues that have been identified by our staff and the lack of compliance towards standard policies. The 2024 RTO mandate has provided valuable lessons on the challenges and opportunities of transitioning back to the office. It highlights the need for flexibility, effective communication, and employee support while upholding corporate policies. In summary, the current state of the ESDC and federal public service is characterized by changing demographics, evolving work expectations, with a strong commitment to the public service values we all hold so dear. By handling these changes properly and learning from the 2024 RTO experience, we can ensure a successful transition and foster a positive work environment. Next slide, please. The ESDC staff conduct falls short of compliance targets and behavioral expectations of the values and ethics codes of the public sector. As a result, there is a need to reimagine the existing RTO supports for staff, as well as the upcoming directive for a 4-day-a-week RTO. This is critical as it impacts the integrity and professionalism of the public service, which is essential for maintaining public trust and confidence. While examining the issues that we are considering today, key considerations must be ensuring that rural communities have equitable access to resources and opportunities. This includes the unique challenges faced by employees in remote locations, developing metrics and effective RTO directives that can be measured and tracked, and always upholding the ethical responsibilities of public servants, including acting in the public interest, maintaining professionalism, and following policies. The primary problem facing the SDC is the non-compliance with the RTO requirements in social media activity. This issue is driven by rapidly shifting demographics, and we hope the rest of our presentation will show the path forward to success for the future. Next slide, please.
While the TBS directive is crucial for operational consistency, a one-size-fits-all approach does not account for ESDC's distinctive role, unique workforce needs, and regional service delivery. For ETAs, the RTO directive means relocating to Service Canada centres, leading to concerns about commuting costs, inadequate office spaces, and rural impacts. While an exemption for ESDC may seem logical, given that it has over 39,000 employees, it is politically unfeasible. Meanwhile, local leaders warn that without in-person advisors, federal program delivery will suffer. A sustainable solution must ensure effective service delivery and address the concerns of ETAs and the rural communities that they serve. Next slide, please. The ESDC cannot maintain a strong, unified, and ethical organizational culture while its staff work from home. The conduct of many ESDC staff is no longer adhering to the value and ethics code for the public sector. This poses a serious risk to public trust and undermines the integrity of a nonpartisan, professional public service and ESDC's ability to remain neutral and effective. Consequently, the directive is crucial for upholding the values and ethics code, protecting ESDC's organizational culture, and bolstering public trust. Implementing this directive is not just about compliance. It's about safeguarding the integrity of Canada's public service and maintaining the values that guide our work. Next slide, please. While the TBS directive aims to standardize workplace policies across the public service, it does present significant risks both for ESDC and across government. With RTO, infrastructure gaps, equity concerns, and employee dissatisfaction could disrupt service delivery and increase turnover. This makes it harder to attract and retain talent and may weaken institutional knowledge over time. Beyond ESDC, a rigid RTO mandate could trigger union resistance and contribute to rising operational costs. If public servants perceive these policies as out of touch, trust in leadership and workplace culture will erode. Meanwhile, the social media directive reinforces professionalism and neutrality, but also risks a chilling effect on public servants' contribution to policy discourse. Unclear enforcement guidelines could also create inconsistencies across departments. While the courts have affirmed the duty of loyalty in cases such as Fraser, they still interpret freedom of expression broadly. Hence, restrictive policies that prohibit public servants from discussing matters of public concern could lead to successful charter challenges. In an era of digital engagement, broad restrictions could also harm recruitment and retention, especially amongst younger, tech-savvy employees. In light of these concerns, ESDC should pursue a more tailored strategy that considers its unique operational realities while still aligning with the directive's intent. Next slide, please.
The goal of the return to work mandate is to curate a work culture and transmit values to the workforce through attendance in office. The question is then, how can ESDC ethically and morally call back the employees, especially when a large number of them were hired under work from home mandates? There are ethical obligations on both sides of this case. The government has ethical obligations to provide safe and clean workplaces, enough workspace for all employees, accessible workspaces, and fair assessments of work performance. The public servants have ethical obligations to both the public and the government as their employer. They must act in the public interest and avoid dissenting government decision-making in public or online. They should comply with work attendance mandates, and they should be utilizing federal assets, including technology, appropriately and ethically. Next slide, please.
And in this slide here, we have options for return to work. So a first option that I would like to present for consideration is to adopt the recommendation number 2 from the Public Treasury Secretary Directive, which aligns with TBS's directive, and it does implement a one-size-fits-all operational plan, and it does prioritize public values and optics, which is important as we want to maintain government's positions throughout communities. However, the risks that are involved is that it does not account for ETA's roles and responsibilities. Currently, there's insufficient infrastructure that's in place, and with the changing workforce demographics, needs, and hiring challenges, it poses great challenges to retention and hiring new individuals as well. Secondly, our recommended approach is to have a RTO reimagined plan, and this is to review all classified positions. A review of all classified positions would re-examine the roles and responsibilities that are outlined for these individuals. This will examine the scope of practice and feasibility of deliverables, while examining the resources required to support realistic metrics and deliverable outcomes for community members. However, there are some risks associated with this, and one of the main risks that we must consider is that there is a potential for an inaccurate review to be conducted about the size of the department, as well as pushback from the TBS. Some of the directors might not align with their goals and mandates. And thirdly, there's an option for consideration to eliminate the RTO for ESDC so that we can, one of the key features of this is so that we can focus on employee outcomes and KPIs, as well as it aligns with the evolving workforce standards. The risks that are associated with this is there's also TBS pushback, lack of shared understanding, and a weakened organizational culture. Our second recommended approach has some risk involved, but it does take into consideration all the positive impacts that a data-driven and a review can support these individuals in their roles. Next slide.
What you see in front of you is our best recommendations on how best to serve our communities and staff. The short, medium, and long-term investments are meant to support our teams and ultimately support RTO directives. This recommendation does recommend a pause on implementing the 4-day RTO directive until the evaluation of position-specific RTO can be completed. This recommendation is not made lightly, but is made with the following considerations. We want to be able to support our communities through enhanced service delivery, through improved infrastructure and technology, engage with local leaders to ensure that plans align with the community needs and priorities, specifically in remote communities, address staff and employee well-being through support systems and technological supports, as well as completing the review to ensure appropriate RTO processes can be completed. It also will align and help align the department with operational efficiency and policy alignment. The most important part of this recommendation is completing the review of all classified positions before the 4-day RTO implementation is completed. This will also take us through the upcoming workforce reduction initiative. In conclusion, our RTO Reimagine plan is designed to support our communities, staff, and the department by taking a thoughtful and strategic approach towards the RTO return to work mandates, given the feedback and issues we have seen since the 2024 directive. Next slide.
So here we have our approach for strategic implementation of the RTO, which is a reimagined plan of what's currently in place. So when we look at phase one to our preparation to engage in this, it would be to engage in stakeholder consultation, a review of what policies, structures are already in place, and take an assessment of the current technological and infrastructural needs of the individuals that are being impacted by this. Phase two would consider reimagining the current RTO, and this would be to conduct a regional pilot implementation, advance training and support, as well as develop a feedback mechanism and implement levers which will contribute to sharing insights about the program. When we look at phase three, we're looking at a full rollout of the RTO plan, which is reimagined. And this is going to consist of ongoing policy updates, engaging comprehensive training, and review of the current technical infrastructures to support accessibility needs. And then when we look at phase four, it's going to consist of continuous improvements. And this is going to just take into consideration performance monitoring, ongoing feedback, and policy adjustments. Next slide, please.
Addressing the inappropriate social media use at ESDC requires a balanced approach, one that upholds duty of loyalty while respecting freedom of expression. One option is to fully adopt recommendation number 1 from the TBS directive. However, this option fails to consider otherwise permissible forms of social media protest, such as from union representatives or nonpartisan constructive criticism. A more practical approach is to restrict social media access on government devices unless needed for job duties, clarify appropriate social media use, and outline clear disciplinary measures. This balances professionalism and personal expression while safeguarding public trust through affirming public servants' neutrality and impartiality. Education is also key. By implementing training and tailored guidelines, we can help employees navigate social media responsibly, setting clear boundaries between professional and personal opinions. Ultimately, a combination of policy clarification, education, and reasonable restrictions will ensure fairness, public trust, and ethical integrity within the ESDC. Next slide, please. Implementing a clear and effective social media policy at ESDC requires a phased approach to ensure fairness, accountability, and smooth adoption. Phase 1 will focus on preparation. We will consult stakeholders, amend ESDC's code of conduct, and draft a clear social media policy aligned with both TBS's directive on social and digital and the spirit of their new directive. Phase 2 will entail training and pilot program. A full rollout will then occur. Social media will be restricted on ESDC devices unless required for job duties. A monitoring system will ensure compliance alongside a fair appeals process. Finally, there will be an ongoing policy reviews to address emerging challenges and refine guidelines based on employee feedback. This structured approach ensures a fair, enforceable policy that protects ESDC's integrity and neutrality while providing employees with clear expectations for responsible social media use. Next slide, please.
Our recommendations will be communicated immediately and transparently, and this includes an update to the Public Service Ethical Framework. Additions include the following. Public servants should uphold the public interest by recognizing the impact of their conduct on the government and the public and uphold the responsibilities of their role. Public servants should use resources responsibly by abiding by the outlined appropriate social media use guidelines on federal and personal devices. Public servants should demonstrate professional excellence by complying with the work attendance expectations as agreed upon with departmental heads. The rationale for these additions are to refresh the ethical framework for a modern workplace where online conduct is a threat to public service neutrality and impartiality. The Return to Work Compliance Amendment aims to enhance public service delivery through connecting public servants with their communities in designated workplaces and ensure operational excellence in service delivery. Next slide, please. There are a few key factors that need to be considered when assessing the feasibility of our recommendations. The RTO mandate can bring equity concerns for women, those living with disabilities, rural communities, and new Canadians. All recommendations need to utilize the Gender-Based Analysis Plus framework to ensure an equitable and intersectional lens is applied to the decision-making. Retaining talent is essential for the current government, especially in light of the changing demographic dynamics. Our phased approach prioritizes retention through employee consultation and performance assessment to uphold diligent and balanced decision-making. The government will need to ensure accessibility through inclusivity and flexibility policies to account for any employees who feel disproportionately affected by RTO. This is essential to creating an ethical workplace culture and will be best fulfilled through employee consultation and policy assessments to ensure that the concerns being aired online are addressed. Our long-term strategy of promoting ethical leadership will ensure that accommodations are made for employees when equitable considerations are brought forward. A public service calling is a driving force for public servants to abide by the amended Code of Ethics and Values. A recommendation of education on social media policy will reinforce the duty of loyalty in the public service and leverage public service motivation for successful compliance with our new Code of Ethics. All of our recommendations are subject to regular review to ensure efficacy and reevaluate departmental goals. Next slide, please.
In conclusion, it is imperative to maintain a commitment to this implementation. We must commit to implementing our RTO Reimagined plan with dedication and diligence. This structured and tailored plan will make adjustments to the current ethical framework, social media guidelines, as well as delivering a phased implementation of our reimagined plan. Public servants are at the heart of everything that we do and must be at the forefront when we look at technical innovation, when we review values and ethics, as we try to maintain public trust and provide a workplace that is free from political interference. Thank you so much.
I think that concludes your presentation. I'm Noah Morris. I'm the head judge. I'm also head of the ESDC panel, the assembled. I want to thank you for a very fulsome presentation. It looked at this really complex issue or series of issues in a really interesting way, and you're dealing in a lot of your conclusions deal with this in a very interesting way too. So I want to thank you, and it is fairly early in the morning on a weekend, and I know all the incredible work you've done. So we have about a little over 9.5 minutes of questions. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Stefania, who has questions about measuring success.
Great, thank you. Thanks everyone for the presentation. So I'm gonna jump right into my first question, which is how will you measure success of your implementation plan? And do you plan to factor public expectations, or will public views play any role in measuring success?
If I could draw us back to slide 9, if that is possible, this would give the high level operational plan for the RTO. And then I will pass it off to my colleagues to talk about some of the social media components of that. The first and primarily token for success is the work being completed in the communities, and can the public access the resources available? What I think we've seen through the pandemic is we need to be dynamic and be able to pivot. That is a hard thing to say in the federal public service. What our plan ahead is showing is that we can pivot and keep the service delivery in mind while maintaining the political and community needs to service the communities in the community in person. We know the communities that we are servicing here. We know when we go into rural Saskatchewan that these community hubs can often be occurring with these workplaces. We need to support that, but also be able to maintain the ability to pivot and utilize our new skill sets and the hybrid work environments that we can show operational efficiencies with. Ultimately, we need to show compliance with the policies. That will be when we show a true sign of success, is that we are showing a higher level of compliance with the return to our work orders than we are currently seeing. As you see in slide Annex 16, we are not having good return to work response rates, and it is decreasing. This is meant to respond to that.
Building on that, with social media, during the pilot phase, we will gather feedback from participants, monitor compliance, and assess the impact on service delivery, employee satisfaction, and adherence to the policy. Key performance indicators such as employee engagement, service delivery quality, and compliance rates will be tracked. This data will allow us to adjust the policy before full implementation and ensure it meets the needs of both employees and the ESDC. The reality is that public servants can always use anonymous accounts to make negative social media comments, but we just want to, the primary concern is that they do not post in any manner that would imply that they're posting in their professional capacity. Thank you.
Okay, Noah, can I have a follow-up question?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it, Stefania.
Okay, great. Okay, so in implementing your plan, what do you think are going to be your easy wins? Like, what's going to be easy to accomplish, and what do you think are going to be your biggest challenges in how you've laid out this plan?
I could jump into that. If we could go to slide 19 in the annex. So when we look at phase 2 of the proposed pilot implementation and training, one of the easiest wins and low-hanging fruit is the feedback mechanism. Being able to get employee buy-in, having a lever where individuals can provide their insight, what's working, what's not working, just being able to implement that that component that allows two-way communication between the folks that are doing the work and the folks that are making the decisions will allow for greater communication and collaboration. When we look at the difficult pieces, it's reimagining the roles of the ETAs in the community. Needs change, appetites change, focus change. What's the relevance of the work? It's no longer business as usual in the communities. Diversity plays a critical component when we assess how we create the roles. What are the deliverables? What are the metrics? What are we seeking to achieve? How do we how do we create roles that are not only enriching for the individuals that that have to deliver and go into the communities, but it's also having those tough face-to-face conversations when you're in those rural communities and you're faced with an individual that's saying, hey, this doesn't work, and how do we reassess as close to real time as possible?
Thanks so much. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Suzanne, who has questions about competing rights. Suzanne?
Thanks a lot, Noah. Great presentation. I really liked how you touched on several of the points. I'm going to just center in on one point. So the directive states that that employees are prohibited from commenting on any issue where the government has taken publicly a position, regardless of whether it occurs during work hours or in their personal time. Now, I like in your presentation that you talked about revamping the ESDC Code of Conduct. Do you see any concerns in aligning that with the Public Values Code of Conduct? How would you present that to us so that we can present that to Treasury Board?
Certainly. And so I think the big risk is that if we are overly restrictive, then we do risk like breaching the charter right under Section 2B of freedom of expression. As I noted during my presentation, the courts have interpreted that right very broadly, although they have affirmed that the duty of loyalty does stand as well. So that being said, if these restrictions are overly broad and they don't meet the standards of the Oak test, then it could risk that the recommendation is not constitutionally sound, in which case that could undermine the public service at the ethical framework that is built upon it or that it relates to. And so that would kind of lead to the topple. So that, I think that underscores the need to frame our more tailored and flexible approach that is not as rigid as the RTO directive or as the TBS directive recommendation originally has made it.
Just a quick follow-up. Thank you for that question. So are you saying that the training will allow your changes in the code at ESDC to be aligned with the Public Values and Ethics Code?
Yes, I think through this training, we can ensure that our employees understand what is and is not appropriate. And that means that they will still have an opportunity to comment on things such as matters of public concern, where the public's interest in that information might outweigh their interest in the duty of loyalty.
Thanks, Noah. That's it for me.
Thanks so much. Michael, we have about a little under 2.5 minutes. What is your question?
Thank you very much for your presentations. I wanted to come back to the same point that Suzanne was asking about. A couple of you made reference to a nonpartisan public service, and you emphasized the importance of that, sort of the integrity of the public service as an institution. I always understood that nonpartisan fundamental to be critical to the deal that public servants entered into when they took their oath from the Queen and or from the King and accepted employment in the government of Canada. The understanding was that it was integral to maintaining support and trust of governments as they changed, that they could turn to a public service that would faithfully implement for them in a nonpartisan manner. I guess what my question falls to you is on your implementation of the social media directive, how persuasive is that argument that was important to a generation in the 80s and the 90s to this generation today, and how integral will it be to your implementation plan?
Thank you for your question, Michael. And I think that really gets to a key issue involved with the situation, being that while the nonpartisan nature of the public service is integral into successfully delivering and serving Canadians, that value is no longer recognized or as cherished or accepted amongst a new evolving demographics. And I think that's the importance. And that underscores an important tension, being that they have evolving expectations of the workplace. They don't want to face these restrictions, or they're less willing to accommodate them. And that highlights the need for education and training and clear guidelines that they can comply with so that they do uphold that nonpartisan public service, the values of a nonpartisan public service, while still feeling that they're not being overly restricted.
I also think that's where the power in the recommendation comes from, is it's an opportunity to champion that core value of the public service with an evolving demographic during a period of workforce transformation. The time for action, the call to action is now for us to be successful for the future of the Canadian public service.
Okay, and with that, we will end there. Thank you so much for your presentation.